Hi, you guys. It's Adrienne. We get to actually hang out. And the bad part is that I have to look at myself the whole time. It would be cool if I could see other people. But anyway, I love me and I love you guys. So I'm sure everything will be fine. Um, so it's always hard to know how to start. So this morning I realized, okay, I've got some time to myself. I can totally go ahead and just spit out the messages that I was given as a kid and just tell you a little bit about myself. I think I might have to I'm trying to figure out if I should just close this window. I mean, I love me and everything, but this is really distracting. Okay, I'm going to minimize the window and see if that helps. Okay, hi, you guys. Good morning. And so here's the deal. I have been blessed and burdened my entire life with some extremely unusual experiences. And I have wondered, wow, what am I supposed to do with these knowings and these things that have happened? Because I didn't want it to seem like bragging, but I also, very understandably was concerned about the kind of judgment that I would receive. So, in social situations, I've tried to share some of these stories and hasn't really worked out that well. But what I've realized over all this time is that these things are so interesting and possibly even useful. I see all this other esoteric information being shared online, and some of it I think is amazing, and some of it I'm like, I could probably contribute to this conversation. So the great exciting part is that all I'm going to do today is take some time, share with you what I know, what I've experienced, and I'm seeing that the bed's kind of shaky here. That's annoying. I'll try not to rattle it too much. Anyway, I'm so excited to just hang out with you and share these stories. And I'm hoping that they're going to resonate and even awaken for you some of your own rememberings so that you can feel a little more confident too. So I read yesterday that Gabriel Garcia Marquez had a great quote. He said, every person has three lives: their public life, their private life, and their secret life. And I was like, yeah, that totally describes me. You may know me as an international video personality, just kidding. A waitress, a caregiver, a friend, somebody who loves to go to your gigs, and, a coach to help you get your stuff done. And you know that I've been creating some of these videos around my angelic contacts, but I haven't really been able to spit out the whole story. And I realized, so my latest job is I worked for a what do you call an elder law attorney, and we do a lot of estate work. And I realized, you know what, any of us could drop dead anytime, and if I don't leave this information in the form of a video, you guys aren't going to have it. I tried to hide it in my little sci-fi novel, which I only wrote a third of because writing is hard. I hid it in a fictional 6-layer narrative. Like, I really, really hit it deep. And so anyway, I'm 50 now. I'm kind of over it. I just want to share the information. And I think that each of us with our secret lives are going to be able to resonate with this. And I'm actually hoping that we will have online forums where we actually talk in real time. I don't feel like you need to, this is what was really holding me back. I don't think any of us needs to be established as some sort of an authority. All we really need to do is share what we really have experienced and what we really do know. And maybe we can get the kind of information and reminders and teamwork and co-encouragement that will help us just knock this global ascension thing out of the park. That's sort of my thing. Okay. So thank you guys for joining me. I couldn't believe the eruption of support and curiosity that came from you guys. I was like, that I couldn't believe you guys wanted to actually sit on this live. I was just kind of warning you that like I'm about to release this video, but the fact that some of you guys are probably here live made me like, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. It's so cool what you guys did for me. So thank you. Okay. So part of the reason I haven't shared this story yet is it's really hard to know where to begin. And it's really hard to, it's vast. This amount of information that I've got is pretty vast, but I'm going to just jump right in. Sorry it took me this long, 5 minutes. And this is going to be probably an hour or two long video because I'm just spilling my whole guts here. And you guys can tune in, tune out. I'll try and later put like a timeline so you can get to the good parts, but I'm not going to waste your time any longer. 5 minutes is way too long. Let's jump in. All right. So I feel like for this story, I'm going to start with my mother really quick. And if I had a slide presentation and knew how to work it, I'd be showing you her picture right now. She was born in July of 1947, which in a military family in Munich, Germany. And this is important because July of 1947 is when the Roswell crash occurred. So my mom was born right around the time of the Roswell crash. That is to say, she came in to Earth incarnation around the time of the Roswell crash. And the reason that I find this significant, besides the fact that she had a military family, was that, so she was born like on the base in Munich right at the end of World War II, which I feel a lot of people came in right at the end of World War II. And then there was this crash. The reason I bring this up is because my brother, who's a year and a half younger than me, passed away a little over a year ago. And at his funeral, they had some childhood pictures. So there was my father, who was only 21 when I was born, my mother, who was only 17 when I was born. They were like high school, college sweethearts. And then there was myself and my brother. And at the time of some of these photos, I must have been probably around 3 years old, and he was about 1 year old, 1.5. We all looked like aliens. I don't know if this was like a 1960s thing or what. So this picture would have been taken in about 1968, 1969. My mom had like the heart-shaped face with that bouffant hair, and my dad had a close-cut haircut. They all had humongous eyes, and my brother and I, we were both kind of bald, and we had big eyes too. So we all looked like kind of like traumatized aliens, and it's like super embarrassing. These were not good pictures. As I got older, as we all got older, we all started looking more human, but it was kind of weird. And super embarrassing because I feel like who knows what the story behind this is, but the story that I've understood is that around the time that the bomb was dropped, there came like a cry for help from Mother Earth. And I feel that the Holocaust didn't help, and the Holocaust of the native people around the world must have been when the first cries for help came out. So it's my feeling that Earth became a bit of an adventure. This is like Survivor. This is like being born on Earth is like incarnating onto this desert island, and all you've got is the stuff that's around you. And in my experience, the people around me were like super mean and brainwashed and traumatized, and like, so I feel like children come in as these full spectrum high vibrational beings. They may come in with a mission, or they may just be like full beings, like, Christed beings, and then society like whittles them down into a little box. But what I like to think is that we live in pretty relevant times. And I think that the dropping of the bomb was kind of like the wake-up call, or the starting pistol for we've got to get this shit together here. My biggest theory is that, okay, how do I say this? I think I'm going to just take you back to how I figured all this out, besides the fact that we looked like extraterrestrials, which was very weird. basically, I remember at probably about age 3, looking on my nightstand one night, and this would have been when I was living in Brooklyn, with my young family who were trying to just live and have work. My father's Italian, so his family was there. I looked on my nightstand, and at about 4 inches tall, there was a little guy on my nightstand and on this like a bookshelf behind my bed. And he was flipping and spinning and talking to me, and I was just this little 3-year-old, and I was just watching him. And he was saying, you know, it's really great that you're a girl. You should never feel bad that you were born a girl. And so, and he probably told me I had great work to do, but I really didn't, he didn't spell it out, and I didn't really understand. But I thought that was unusual. Okay, so I started keeping track of like unusual things that were happening. Then the next really unusual thing that happened didn't happen for about 4 more years. What was going on was I was just this big, wide open kid, taking in the world. And I remember my parents tried for about 10 minutes to be, you know, like really normal parents and not overworked 1970s parents. And they taught us like the Lord's Prayer. And in the Lord's Prayer, it says, on earth as it is in heaven. And that kind of jarred my mind. I went, what does that mean? On earth as it is in heaven. Are you trying to tell me that there's different realms and that there are ways of doing things? And I just suddenly got this big download about creating heaven on earth. And I think my father validated that too. And it seems to be like one of those subtexts of Christianity is that we are here to create heaven on earth. And so I was like, okay, so there's different realms, and people could be living on different realms. And we're here on some sort of a project to make the world better. And then I just hung out with, like, how do I say, caregivers, grandparents, neighbors, all in New York, and they were super negative, and just like very, very socialized. So, you know, that whole idea about earth and heaven and all that good stuff just kind of had to go by the wayside. And I remember having a fever and having to lay down at my grandmother's house and seeing one of these Catholic crucifixes on the wall with like the agonized Jesus. And I had never seen one of those. And the greatest sense of evil, pain, and despair came out of that crucifix. It just kind of grabbed me. And I thought, you know, this earth place is really, really weird. It is so messed up. Like, I mean, so you take a little child and they look at the suffering, naked Jesus on the cross, who's supposed to be a religious icon. And I felt viscerally, the main message I got was, this is what happens to troublemakers around here. I was like, okay, not going to do any heaven on earthing thing around here, even though supposedly you're Christianity and this is what you want. And they're like, no, you know, and you know how the Christian doublethink is. They're like, no, this is Jesus in his victoriousness. He died for our sins. And it's like, okay, so there's all these double messages coming at the unlimited child who gets born in. And it just, it crisscrosses us and traumatizes us. It's horrible. This is a horrible place. Sorry. So then I remembered, oh, wait, why was I born? And I remembered, how do I say this? I think I jumped into incarnation on a mission, somewhat forbidden. Like I really wasn't supposed to be here. Like what I was coming to do was going to fuck some shit up. And that control system did not want that to happen. And at the same time, they constantly are longing for truth. So it was sort of a love-hate relationship between all of us angelic beings who jumped in and the system that desperately wants to be overthrown. So that's the funny part. So like I tend to think of the earth life now as being sort of like a rugby game. It's like this really high intensity, high contact, full contact sport. And so just even fully incarnating is like a huge challenge for a whole lot of us, because along with incarnating comes cause and effect, hunger, discomfort, pain, fear, death, eventually. Like, this is a rough ride. And I can understand why God, the unlimited oneness, created this as like a project, just like any other project, to know itself. But wow, the stakes and the discomfort and the trauma and the war and the stakes are really high. And I found out later exactly how high they really were. There's this old conundrum, like an old theological question of, could God create a boulder too heavy for even him/her, it, to lift? So in other words, could the creative force create a puzzle, like one of these closed room games where you have to rely on your teammates to solve the puzzle and get out of the confined space? That's kind of like what we're in now, only we've got some competing teams. And I'm kind of part of, and if you're watching this, you're probably part of my team. I'm kind of one of the captains of like the nerdy underdog team. And we're the ones who are going to win it for everyone, because we're all super nice, super kind, very loving, and a little bit of losers. Like, we decided to take the long way. We grew slowly, and none of us accepted any, how do I say, none of us sold out. All of us took the stairs instead of the elevator, because we knew that just like the Aztecs and the Mayas and the Incas say, we're like on the fifth or sixth world. As we tried to create a world, as consciousness tried to create a world, if there's anything within the structure that's not sound, it just collapses. And so, with Noah's Ark and the flood and all sorts of other different collapses, basically, and some of the worlds that got created didn't even last 10 minutes. The way that the world was structured by us as God/goddess was like, okay, so you've got life, and then you've got dynamic, and it has to have a flow, and it has to have a balance. And if one of those critical elements is too much or too little, the other side has to compensate. And if it has to compensate beyond a certain mathematical parameter, then it just collapses, sort of like a cake falling in the oven. So, this, there's a funny saying that says, an optimist believes that this is the best of all possible worlds. A pessimist knows it is. In other words, this world that we're in right now, where you're watching me on this video and you're dealing with what you're dealing with, and I'm dealing with what I'm dealing with, and here I am trying to poke a hole through and tell you the story. This is the best of all previous worlds. And I'll tell you why. Like, we could have been toast before the year 2000. And there were many of us who created an opposite push. So basically, a whole bunch of us came in, and I may have been part of the first wave, or even my mother, maybe we were part of like some sort of extragalactic, help force. That we're here to like help unfuck things up so that we can truly have that world that God force wanted to create to live in. Like, this is where God wants to live. Like, we thought it would be fun to be physical. We thought it would be kind of a blast to have music and food and sexual love, as opposed to just astral etheric love, to like really engage in the game of life. And unfortunately, for the past few millennia on this planet, it's all been just about trauma and imbalance and control systems. And it's been a big problem. And the biggest problem, and the reason I'm here talking with you today, is that none of this is supposedly real or true. according to the outer physical, political, geopolitical world, we're just taxpayers, consumers, and we're munching our planet down, and we're going no place good. And, you know, it's really fear-based. And we know that if we're going to create the world that this place was meant to be, that we have to break through all that conditioning. And it's pretty much like the challenge of a lifetime. But if you can try to remember the struggle in the birth canal, the day you were born, especially if you like had a conventional vaginal birth, the day you were born was pretty much the hardest day of your life. You didn't know if you were going to survive. You didn't know if your mother was going to survive. You didn't know where you were going, except that it was like too small where you were. And in order for us to even be conceived in the first place, astronomical odds, right? And to make it through pregnancy and then to push our way through, even though it's so normal in this world, it's a huge, huge struggle and challenge. And I actually feel like humanity is kind of in the middle of one of those birth crises again. And that's why it's so important. And I know so many of you have gotten this message, even though I've only released it sporadically, that we must hold on to our vision for the world as we know it shall be. Because when you hold that vision, you create a lucid core frequency. So everything, all possibilities are out there being chaotic, you know, and coming and going and moving in form and out of form. When you hold on to a particular vision and allow it to evolve, obviously we're always learning more. Then you've created a point of focus that can organize the matter around it. That's why it's so important that instead of us getting caught up in the world that we're being presented in the media, or the world, the timelines of our fears, you know, the economic collapse, the ecological collapse, the zombie apocalypse, the police state. What are some other horrible timelines that are out there? You know, we won't even mention Donald Trump, right? Just kidding. We've got all these potential timelines, and most of us can spin, you know, and the media loves us to do this. When we're spinning around wondering if these different timelines are going to happen, what we're not doing is creating the positive timeline. In other words, all of these other 7 to 9, who knows how many, timelines are all pretty negative, and none of them are going to create anything brand new or exciting or inspirational or uplifting. There's only one timeline that is going to create the world that we want. And so for shorthands, we call it the positive timeline. And if you can unite on your inner realms with your version of the positive timeline and anchor it as the only inevitable possibility for this birthing, emerging humanity / Gaia, because we're actually all part of a larger organism. You know, humans are like part of Gaia's creative dream, along with all the other wonderful animals and microbes and flows like water and air and heat. So we're all part of this oneness. If you can hold an anchor to your particular version of what the positive timeline is, it's a done deal. In fact, we have already, through the stories I'm about to tell you, I'll show you how we have already anchored this. We have already passed the tipping point. We've passed innumerable tipping points. And fortunately, thanks to you guys and the people just on the other side, and the people coming after us, there's so many players in this game in so many dimensions. And there's only one positive outcome. And how do I say this? I mean, it doesn't mean everybody gets everything they want all the time, but it does mean that it's all building towards something good. Okay, so the secular humanist perspective is like, yeah, a lot of the world is evil, and humans have the capacity to be very depraved and debased. But we have civilization to make it better. And civilization makes art, and it makes safety, and it makes structure. But what we learned in the 70s and the 80s was a huge sense of betrayal, because we realized, and really from Vietnam and Korea, and people now can see the thread of colonialism and imperialism going all the way back, but we weren't really seeing it in the cultural narrative. We didn't get it until like the mid-70s, when we realized, oh my gosh, we're not necessarily a force for good. Society, civilization, Western civilization is not necessarily a force for good. It's a force for control and order and symmetry to some degree. And then there's like this backstory. So we're not going to go talking about the cabal and stuff yet, because some of that is obvious and true, and some of it is it's like a whole different, it's a whole extra school of debate. Who knows? Maybe it'll be coming up later. So when I was very young, okay, so my mother and father were awesome parents for about 10 minutes. They were really into it. And then some kind of chaos came and hit our world, where my father stopped coming home. He started drinking a lot. They were fighting a lot. We were getting spanked for no reason. Like all of a sudden, a lot of negativity came in. Maybe it came in when I was experiencing that crucifix and that whole reversal that came out of that crucifix when I was staring at it during my fever. And that was about age 4. So that would have been like a year after Archangel Michael. So I got down on my knees one night after my father had come home and they were fighting and we'd gotten spanked for no reason, and like life was just super sucking and I was still so young. I got down on my knees like they taught me, and I prayed really hard for us to get out of there. And sure enough, within about 48 hours, my mom, after she picked me up from kindergarten, she picked me up in like a taxi, and she had some suitcases. And she let us know, my brother and me, that we were heading to New Mexico to go and live with her family. And I asked, is Daddy coming? And she's like, no, Daddy is not coming. And although I was really sad, because I was starting to really, it was a love-hate thing. Like it was that age where you'd be bonding with your father as a young woman, and yet he was not trustworthy, and everything was in reversal. Like basically Satan was in the house, and it wasn't his fault. I think they were all just being used. But this energy of reversal was with us. So there we go. My mother and my brother and me were going out to Santa Fe. And I get to go to a Montessori school for a couple of years, where it was very unstructured. There was just stuff to play with, like educational toys to play with, and a piano, and lots and lots and lots of free time, and just a little bit of structured time. And so that was a wonderful place to hang out. And then around 3rd grade, I got into public school. And that was the year that things really started to get interesting, though. So I got to go to 3rd grade in public school at an open classroom school. It's one of these experimental schools. And I started just picking up a whole lot of information. Now, the first day I got there, I was pretty much like gang bullied by all my classmates. I was a year younger. I was super scrawny. I probably still looked like an extraterrestrial, whatever. And you know, how do I say? It was a Catholic town, a very normal kid town. And that's what kids are all about at that age, is like enforcing norms. So since I totally wasn't normal, I really caught a lot of hell around there. And it was really, really painful. But at the same time, I was getting all kinds of really cool information from different realms. Because it was an open classroom, we had teachers who were there because they wanted to be there. And I could tell that they had like a mission to educate the new generation so that we would help fix things. And we didn't even really know things were broken. So this was all really a big news flash. So 1973 was really interesting because there was a lot of push to get us out of Vietnam, and we were really paying attention to the nature of politicians because the Watergate stuff started to hit the fan. That was a major shift. And Ms. Magazine was established. Gloria Steinem, who had at one point been a Playboy bunny, decided to lend all of her celebrity to the liberation of women. We had just barely started to win some, the war for civil rights was just, it was pretty heated up, and it was just starting to cool down, which was odd because the death of Martin Luther King actually kind of solidified the validity of the civil rights movement. So that was like a pretty cool sacrifice on his part, because his death really made it that it was completely societally understood that equal rights for people of all races was like a done deal. That was like no longer that controversial in the mainstream dialogue. And so what I've noticed ever since this time in third grade was that we're this society that is in flux. We're evolving. Our attitudes are changing and growing and building. We're a self-creating society. And I think that all of that got touched off with the bomb, where we realized, oh, we're on this one timeline, and then somebody drops the bomb, namely America, dropped the bomb on the Japanese, and suddenly we realized, oh my gosh, if we keep going in this direction, we are going to have the planet's going to be toast, within 5 or 10 years. So the Cold War was a way for all of the powers to kind of keep a stasis. But on the societal level, people started awakening to the fact that we were creating society. Our attitudes and our conversations and our personal conclusions and our creations were all co-creating our society. And I don't think there was ever really a time in history, except maybe at the end of World War I, where people were so acutely aware that we were the creators of the world that we lived in. So it was really an exciting time to grow up. So you can thank Gloria Steinem and the feminists for the fact that women are not just known as Miss for being unmarried or Mrs. for being married. The fact that we had an appellation of Ms. meant that women were standing right alongside men in society as equal players, that we weren't just being kept behind closed doors, and sidelined. So that was a cool thing. So the next time that something really unusual happened to me was towards the end of that third grade year. My mother was driving us home from having had dinner at our grandparents' house. And so my brother and I were in the back seat of the car as she's driving through the dark. And, I don't know if you remember what it's like to be in the back seat of the car while somebody else is driving, but it's very drowsy. It's kind of neat. You just kind of getting shifted around. And all of a sudden in my ears, I heard, well, there wasn't any analogy for that. It was like having headphones on. I heard voices in my head that were talking to each other, and it was as if I was patched in on a conference call. And so here I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I'm hearing these voices in my head, and they're saying, oh, I think we've got her on the line. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's here. So I was really quiet because I was 8 years old and couldn't understand anything anyway, and just like super overwhelmed, and just listening to see who these people were and like if they'd start talking. And so somebody broke in and said, okay, Ensign Adrian, we're waiting for your report. And I was quiet and I waited to see maybe they'd go away. Maybe they were talking about somebody else. But no, apparently, according to them, I was on a mission and I was supposed to give my status report. And they were like, your report. And I'm like, report on what? What are you saying? And they're like, the reason you were born, your mission. And this is my favorite part of the story. I had to say, you guys, I'm sorry. Are you aware that I'm only 8 years old and I have no idea what you're talking about whatsoever. And so they kind of like had to check their little logbook and go, oh, you're right. Holy camoli. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, could you call back when I'm a little bit older? Thank you. And then at the end I said, and by the way, could you please send me some mentors and trainers, because I really don't know what's going on. When you're born into this earth realm, you know, you pretty much have all of your pre-memories wiped. You know, they used to spank a baby when they'd get born, and that was like one of the primary traumas. And then for boys, they've got circumcision, and then you've got all these vaccines. There's like so many things that are designed almost cruelly to wipe out your memory of your pre-life, and you know, why you were born and what you're doing here and everything. And I can see, like, on a consciousness level that, like, you know, if you wanted to make the game that much harder, that much more challenging, you would definitely want to not remember who you were. But the fact of the matter is that we need to remember who we are. We need to create this heaven on earth. There's only one kind of being that would ever possibly benefit from everyone not knowing who they are, and that would be like the 0.001%. Whoever it is that benefits from people just obeying and conforming and going to work and putting themselves in war as cannon fodder and, you know, paying their taxes. Every other life form on this planet needs us to remember who we were before we were born, needs us to remember why we're here and what we're doing. So now I've told you my theory about why we're here and what we're doing. You may have other theories too. But I mean, I like my theory a lot because it's this total win-win. It's a win-win-win-win-win. And that's what I'm here for. So anyway, there I was, normal third grader, noticing that society is changing, noticing that Watergate was like a pretty cool thing that happened that caused everyone to wake up. I heard a little bit about marijuana and LSD, and I thought those were really good. I just knew that anything that could help people break the grid-like pattern and awaken to who they really were, and awaken to who they were before they got here and why they may have chosen to be here, was all for the good. So I was a big supporter of all that at age 7. I could even tell then that, you know, because I don't know, do you guys remember, do you remember the first time that you thought, holy shit, I'm surrounded by mean zombies? You know, and we had a choice as kids that you could either buy in and become another one of them, or what happened with Generation X is that they pretended sadistically to become one of them, but they really were open to their higher knowledge, but they could still be horrible. And or you could just break all of it and just be who you are. I feel like a lot of the influx of the autism spectrum kids now, you know, some of it you could say, oh, they're trying to darken the light beings even more. But for me, okay, so at some point around that year, I actually became borderline autistic. I may have a touch of Asperger's myself. Because I just couldn't understand how the language worked and how it didn't seem to align with the body language of people. And there were these strange, so I became very withdrawn, and I could no longer really put words and meaning together anymore. I felt so utterly betrayed by this earth world and the strange things that were happening that I couldn't talk about because they weren't real, that I pretty much just withdrew. And that didn't make life any easier because the bullying was just absolutely phenomenal. And there wasn't really a word for bullying back then. It was just that I was really different and they were trying to keep me in line. So it was really super sad. And the weirdest part for me was that I could look at those kids who were bullying me and I could see their wise beings. I could see that they knew. I knew that they knew. Maybe they were fallen angels. You know, why would anyone get that sort of sadistic joy out of keeping another person down? And I could see that in the bigger game, they were trying to make me stronger and trying to wake me up. But it's like trying to tell a soul to incarnate while you're beating them. It's like, well, if you were fully incarnated, you could fight back. But it's like, who's going to fully incarnate while they're under constant trauma? So that's why I'm like the fighter that I am, because and how come I believe in so many people? How come I believe in pretty much everyone? Because I know that even though we're responsible for our own minds and our own lives, that we really, how do they say? They say Earth's existence is a rough neighborhood. You know, we came into a place where trauma was possible and was actually the way things are done. That is how they enforce the norms on the planet, is through trauma. You know, and so any messages that say, oh, you're just responsible for everything that happens to you and it's all just a reflection of you, I'm like, that might be true, but there's also this gray area in between where, like, I know that pure souls came in and they just got the shit beat out of them the moment they got here, to the point where we might not even be able to fulfill our mission. So this is another reason why I haven't been able to speak plainly about this. If you knew me in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and growing up in Santa Fe, if you knew me in those years, here's what you didn't know. I knew all that shit then, and I couldn't say anything. So just imagine, you know, okay, so then my mom got into, so what happened was after the conference call, and I said, please start sending mentors. They did. I met a woman with my same name who was a weaver, and she was probably in her 50s, and she just talked to me like an equal. And all my grandfather's friends would talk to me like an equal. And beautiful musicians and inspiring speakers would start to come to our school. And my mom started getting involved with meditation and yoga. And she was just a normal white girl, sort of like Obama's mom. It was a lot like Obama's mom in that she was a single mom with a military parents and a dark-skinned, gifted child who could easily become president, but I did not want to. I had no interest, and they wanted to, you know, fast track me into that kind of stuff. I had absolutely no interest. There was nothing there for me. I couldn't grab this level of obedience and self-sacrifice that they wanted. I couldn't do it. And I couldn't relate to money. Like, money was not a motivator for me. It didn't mean anything to me. And it just, none of that stuff was interesting to me. So that was the interesting part, is that here I was being contacted by extra dimensionals, and the extra dimensionals that were contacting me were kind of bureaucratic, and I just didn't trust them. They just seemed so military and organized and kind of heartless. And when you get down to earth here, you really learn a lot about the heart. It's like one of the greatest things about being here. And so while the extra dimensionals are educating us, we're actually also educating them, because they had no idea about the heart. So about a year after that, I was in a movie theater, and I wonder if you guys have ever had this experience. Do you remember going to like matinees as a kid and watching the movie on the screen, and the thing that's going on in your head has nothing to do with the movie on the screen? Like, you're at, we call it ADD, accessing different dimensions. Laura Eisenhower talks a little bit about how this happens to her still when she watches movies, and it probably does to me too, but I don't really watch movies that much. Accessing different dimensions during these movies. So I was in some movie, it was probably something stupid, some Disney film like Mary Poppins or something, and I was probably about 9 at the time. And all of a sudden, I and all the kids on the earth, the way it seemed to me, we're getting this massive download about an imminent danger, basically a big, bad galactic war that was, Earth was the tipping point, and we were the tipping point of Earth. So as we chose, Earth chose, alignment chose, and the universe would choose. And so, I mean, we're supposed to be seeing this nice, fun movie, and we're getting this download about how, like, the entire fate of the universe has to do with our ability to overcome fear. So fascinating. I can't believe that they gave so much responsibility to a bunch of children, but that was what it was like growing up in Santa Fe in the 1970s. And I cannot wait to hear if any of you guys have had these kind of experiences, because I mean, I wasn't alone. Oh yeah, that's right. And just before that, holy shit. So there I was getting bullied in 3rd grade. And in the night times, I was going to this angel school. All my classmates and I, we were in the dream plane, and we're getting instructed by like these long white robed, long-haired angels. And so that was really cool too. And that's probably part of why I was able to see the bullies' higher selves, because we were all going to this angel school together. And we would do stuff like Reiki the earth. You know, we'd be sitting in a circle, and there'd be like this hologram of the earth, and we were just like putting our hands over it. So many wonderful experiences. And the angels would tell us, you know, you are probably going to forget pretty soon that you were ever even here. So it's really important that we get as much work done as we can during this visit. So, okay, so Archangel Michael, galactic conference call, right? Angel school, and then this horrific download about the universe being in peril. So the nature of this, the nature of the menace, as we were being shown, it had to do with like basically a heartless totalitarianism, which is one of those alternate timelines that we still get a glimpse of, you know, with the police state timeline. You know, and George Orwell, and this idea of like a boot stomping a human face for eternity. That is a timeline. That's a timeline that exists. And basically, we were in the position of helping tip that. And it was going to take all the strength and all the courage we had and all the push we had, and us facing our own fears too. And it was super, super challenging. So when I was in angel school, the angels would tell me, hey, Adrienne, you've got to tell everybody about us. You've got to tell them that we exist and that we're here. And I was so freaking bullied and so freaking traumatized. And then I had sexual abuse at home on top of all that other trauma. I was like, I'm sorry, I cannot tell everybody that the angels are here and talking to me. I mean, life is already hard enough for me. I don't even know if any of this is true. I don't know if I just have like a really, really good imagination. I can't take that risk. I'm really sorry. But they wanted us to tell everybody. They really, really did. They're like, don't be afraid. Everybody loves angels. It's going to be great. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I was already being bullied every single frickin' day. I was like famous at whatever school I would go to, because I went to a few, as being like the really weird person, the horrible, nerdy, ugly, boogery, like just disgusting, okay person. And I was like, I know I'm not this person that they're projecting all over me, but I'm certainly not going to run around telling everybody about the angels at this point. So that's how we ended up getting to that little crisis the next year, which was a long time coming. If you think about all the rises of empires and the way that military forces used to make people comply in civilization after civilization after civilization, and, you know, the genocide, the deliberate breaking of treaties by the American government, what I call America's original sin. The thing that was so heinous and so wrong that we'll never be on the right side of karma until we fix that. And we can run around trying to ignore it, you know, going, oh, we're all modern now. But, you know, until the US completely fixes the fact that they genocided some really nice people and broke every motherfucking treaty they ever made with the natives, we're never going to be on the right side of history. It's just not going to happen. And so our society keeps spinning out that pattern, right? That pattern of resources and control, scarcity, lack, you know, roping everyone in, forcing them to pay taxes for them to do these adventurous wars that are only benefiting the corporations. I mean, it's the same freaking pattern that that the American Revolution was fought to fight, frankly, right? Where the Dutch West Indies Company wanted a piece of the action, and the colonists were like, no, you're not really giving us anything. We don't owe you shit. So, enough cussing. So happy that I'm here to get to talk to you about this. Okay, so there I am in the movie theater, and we're getting this download. All the children on earth practically are getting this download about this horrible, horrible, heartless fascism that has spread throughout the motherfucking galaxy, and it's trying to take over the earth. And we're like the last bastion of freedom, inner freedom. And so that's another thing I love to remind people, is that the biggest thing that you can do to really anchor the positive timeline is to be yourself fully, because it's the facts, it's the actual full spectrum being of who you really are, like who you came in as, and all that 8 and 12 dimensional stuff, and coming down into a body, into the 3D realm, and just being here in our androgyny, in our gayness, in our bisexuality, because, you know, they in our multi-raceness. You know, there's all these ways that society tries to like pit people against each other and like enforce a norm, so that when you're outside the norm, you feel shitty too, and like you're never good enough, and you'll keep doing their thing. The more that we can just love and accept ourselves as we truly are and be that full spectrum being, it's like plants pushing through the asphalt. You know, it's like a baby tree that eventually turns into a really big tree. And the good part about that is that if you feel like your particular tree has been cut down again and again and again, like every time you try to emerge, you get cut back, you get knocked down, you get floored, you get pinned. The good part, as we know kind of about bonsais, the more that they trim us, the more that society or adversity trims you as you're emerging, the bushier, the healthier, and the deeper your roots. So that's why Generation X is kind of cool and kind of important, is because we thought we were going to be the generation just after the hippies that was going to like be the heirs to this incredible free society that they were busy building. But society's patterns still caused us to be, we were pretty conformist. Class of 82. So, you know, we got to be the parents of the next generation, though. And that's why the millennials are so important to me right now, is because you guys, they guys, are, because mostly who's listening to me today are boomers and Generation X. But the millennials are important because they're the next guard. And they're lawless in some ways that we could never have claimed for ourselves, but they're also deeply conformist and angry about it. So the good part is that they're angry about it, because that means that they know it's not quite right, that it's not okay to be that much in the closet, so, for lack of a better word. So that's the exciting part, is that one of the biggest things you can do to make the world better is to just be you. Because when your full spectrum comes in, you expand the grid, that the grid work that's around you. And yeah, we need to create the alternative housing. We need to abolish the IRS. We need to abolish the Fed. Those are all things that need to be done. But the place that the ability to do that comes from is you're loving yourself enough to let yourself fully be yourself. And that's why it's so liberating for me to be able to talk to you today, and why I'm super excited and committed to open forums where we can all talk about this stuff, because it's been so cool that there's been all this channeling and all this galactic information, but a lot of it's still kind of top down. Like, I try not to read other people's mystic messages unless I know synchronistically, like, it's going to give me some help, because they all seem to have a slightly different grid work of why we're here, who the players are, and how it all works. And I still had my stuff, that I knew. And every time I was, reading some of this material, I was like kind of questioning and doubting what I knew. Some of it would confirm it, and then some of it wouldn't. And it was just super confusing. And I am betting that you're having the same experience. So the exciting part about us sharing our stories as we recall them as is, with like a minimum of conclusion drawing, unless you feel pretty certain, is that just speaking your truth, especially when it's a really, really weird truth, is like the ultimate lifestyle goal. Like, the ability to be yourself makes it that it almost doesn't matter if you have money, if you have a place to live, if you have people who love you. Just you loving you and you knowing what you know is pretty much the meat of life. In other words, I know that you've probably met up with the conundrum of, would you rather have love or money? Or would you rather have truth or money? And of course, it's a false conundrum in essence, because you can have both. But within the control system, it's been pretty clearly outlined that if you want to have acceptance or official status, you're also going to have to perhaps betray your truth. But because each of us is coming and being who we are, and we're stretching that container, pretty soon that's no longer going to be true either. And as we find, the people who seem the most normal turn out to be the ones who are like the most sexually depraved, or at least just sexually creative. But basically, that which they most feared to show the public is or even that they're persecuting it, is like the stuff that they're doing. So I like to think of us as being an unblackmailable generation, because and that's going to liberate us to create some real changes, because we don't have anything hanging over our heads. It's like, yeah, I'm a freak. Yeah, I'm a pervert. Yeah, I'm not perfect. Yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes. Whatever it is, we don't have anything to hide. And I love that. And I know that's why it's going to work. So I can't wait to find out how you guys are taking this. Like I said, I'm sorry about all the asides. I wish everything was like perfectly polished, and that's I've been trying to polish this up for like 5 years. And now all of a sudden I just realized, oh my God, let's just spit it out. What the hell? And the great part is that hopefully it's going to resonate with all of your stuff that you've been having trouble spitting out too. So I used to think my worst secret was that I had experienced sexual abuse. And then as I got older, I was like, oh yeah, what about all that galactic / angel / extra dimensional stuff? And I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty weird too. So what was I love my life path because it brought me a lot of surprises. So one of the surprises had to do with like interdimensional masters who would come through the veil. I'd either be sitting and speaking with somebody, and all of a sudden they would just turn into somebody else, and we'd have a whole conversation on another level. Or other times, like just a really vivid dream right in the middle of my day. And the greatest part about these so-called masters is that they are just like pretty much the best versions of you. There's nothing inaccessible or impossible to understand about them. They're just really nice, super accountable, super compassionate, hardworking beings, just like you and me. And in fact, we are the masters. We are masters. These, and not just because we're all one, but because the flavor of greatness, the things that make a person really truly great, and what they say without ego, you know, a whole nother conundrum. The things that make a person really great are not their snottiness. It's like their compassion is what makes them great. That's how come they say like the most meek person is truly the greatest. It's because they're super nice. So these masters, when I say they're interdimensional, what I mean is that they live in another room. You know, they live in another magical kingdom right next to this one, but they're just caring, adult, mature, caring about the future kind of individuals, just like you and me. And in fact, I do feel that we are masters. We think we've got these problems. We think we've got these personalities. We think we've got these, you know, riddles. But I'm really, really sure that because you came from the 12th dimension, down through the 8th dimension, down through the 6th and the 4th, and then here you are, we're all super duper loving master beings. And that's who we get to be. You remember how I guess maybe it was the Hopis who were saying that we are the people we've been waiting for? That's why. And it's so exciting because you don't have to be anybody other than you. You don't have to know anything more than you already know. You already probably know too much. I know I do. And so that's what's so exciting. And I can see where we get messed up because, for instance, think about the holy books. The holy books describe this world, this special world we're creating, and they describe the qualities of character that a true master has. But if you just limited yourself to the book, then you would always be looking outside of yourself for confirmation. It's only when we start to live from the inside out. And I mean, yeah, sometimes we fuck up, right? Like we get too egotistical, or we hurt someone's feelings, or we do something dishonest, you know, like experimenting life. I don't know. People do stupid things, you know, or we drive the car wrong. We accidentally hit a person. This did not happen to me, but it happens every day. So we do stuff that messes up, but it doesn't mean that and sometimes you need something like the Bible or a church to remind you of who you are and remind you of the larger game. But mostly my gospel is that you do you. You be you as truthfully and honestly and unguardedly as possible. And you change the game by doing that. So, next chapter. Around age 11, I did a lot of babysitting. I would take the kids out during the summers, you know, and we'd all go to the municipal swimming pool. If you're a Santa Fe person, you'll know what I'm talking about. So there's this indoor municipal swimming pool called the Salvador Perez Pool. And it's next to the Salvador Perez Park, which had a locomotive in it. And we would like sneak under the barbed wire fence and climb around this really magical locomotive, which I mean, it's just a train. But for us, it was a big deal. And so across the street was this swimming pool, and they had like the cranky women who'd give you this like mesh bag you were supposed to put your clothes in, and there was like a pin, you know, you'd pin it on yourself and you'd give them the hanger with your clothes in it. You know, and you're changing, and then you're going into this big enclosed swimming pool, and everything was echoing. During free swim time, there would be probably 300 kids, and they're all doing different things. They're all clustered here and there, and they're all in the pool and out of the pool, and you're not allowed to run, but they're still running, and it's just like total hubbub. And so I remember finding that this hubbub was an amazing place for me to how do I say, for me to commune and be alone. And then what would happen is every time that I was allowed to commune and be alone, I would find these unexpected transmissions. And this is how I know that unless I'm like just super crazy in the same way that like 2 or 3 billion people on the planet are also super crazy, that this stuff must be true to some degree. Because I always forgot that this dimension existed until it would come and grab me again. So I was just a kid in my little swimming suit, way too skinny, feeling bad about that, whatever, you know, and so happy that everyone's leaving me alone as I'm grabbing my little floaty board that had a dolphin on it, and just like looking down into the water and wondering what it'd be like to be a mermaid. And you know, in this public pool full of like 300 yelling, screaming kids. And that would be my alone time, you know, and I'd like just sort of space out, or I'd float and just look at the ceiling. And what happened was all that yelling echoing in the building would make this sort of white noise. And I would have these revelations. Now, one day, one of these revelations was extremely alarming, because we're still on that galactic war thing. Basically, the information I was given was that there were races within the universe that came from different star systems, and they didn't get along. Basically, each of them embodied different parts of the psyche, and they had different values. So there were like super linear people, kind of like Spock, you know, like the Vulcans in Star Trek. And then there were super emotional and fiery and warlike people, kind of like the Klingons in Star Trek. And then there'd be other different kinds of races too, you know, races who were very, very gentle, races who were really very nerdy and conformist. But these were all different kinds, you know, races of like women warriors. There were all these different galactic races. And they had been at war for really roughly millions of years. And you could say that they were analogous to the parts of the human psyche who all need to come into integration. But the truth of the matter is, at least the truth that I received, was that they all chose to send their emissaries, you know, their best people, their best representatives, into this 3D Earth experience so that we could work this out in real time. But some of the cheaters going to cheat. So some of these races did not come in with goodwill, and they were able to kind of like sew up their little piece of control. And so one day while I was in the municipal swimming pool, I was approached, for lack of a better term, by an angry squad of like green moms. By green moms, I mean like hippie moms, you know, like when hippie moms get really mad and they're like, that kid's too violent, you know, and they want to like legislate all the violence out of the world kind of thing. Well, this group of hippie moms was coming in, and they were like this squad, and they were like, Earth has crossed the threshold. This is a failed experiment, and we want to build a galactic bypass, just sort of like in Douglas Adams. We've got to get rid of Earth. This was stupid. This was a bad idea. It's never going to work. We should get rid of it. We're just going to annihilate it. There's nothing of worth going on there anyway. So I heard this, and even though I knew I was only 11, and who am I, and I'm just a pipsqueak, I kind of piped up, sort of like in Horton Hears the Who, you know, where there's this one tiny little voice and only one being with really big ears hears that voice. Well, I was like piping up. I was like, excuse me, no, you can't do that. And they're like, why not? And I said, well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm here. There's good people here, and I'm here. Number two, if you wipe out Earth, you're going to destabilize your entire little interdimensional game. Like, where did I come up with this? But I could see it. It was like, you know, I was just describing a graphic to them. I'm like, I was seeing something like a 3-dimensional chess set, you know, and they're playing their little stratagems. Meanwhile, the living Earth, the heart of the galaxy, which is the heart of this particular universe, which is the heart of the multiverse, if you fucking wipe that out, you're going to destabilize your entire interdimensional game. So I strongly suggest that you back off. And that's what I did. I stood up for the planet at age 11 and said, don't touch my friend. Basically, I felt like I was advocating for Gaia, like a little sister or like a friend, or like a mom on life support or a friend on life support. I was like, don't you dare. And they said, okay, we'll give you 20 more years to work this out and show us evidence of actual evolvable intelligent life on this planet. And so that was about yelling, screaming kids. And that would be my alone time, you know, and I'd like to sort of space out, or I'd float and just look at the ceiling. And what happened was all that yelling echoing in the building would make this sort of white noise. And I would have these revelations. Now, one day, one of these revelations was extremely alarming because we're still on that galactic war thing. Basically, the information I was given was that there were races within the universe that came from different star systems, and they didn't get along. Basically, each of them embodied different parts of the psyche, and they had different values. So there were like super linear people, kind of like Spock, you know, like the Vulcans in Star Trek. And then there were super emotional and fiery and warlike people, kind of like the Klingons in Star Trek. And then there'd be other different kinds of races too, you know, races who were very, very gentle, races who were really very nerdy and conformist. But these were all different kinds, you know, races of like women warriors. There were all these different galactic races. And they had been at war for really roughly millions of years. And you could say that they were analogous to the parts of the human psyche who all need to come into integration. But the truth of the matter is, at least the truth that I received, was that they all chose to send their emissaries, you know, their best people, their best representatives into this 3D Earth experience so that we could work this out in real time. But some of the cheaters going to cheat. So some of these races did not come in with goodwill. And they were able to kind of like sew up their little piece of control. And so one day while I was in the municipal swimming pool, I was approached, for lack of a better term, by an angry squad of like green moms. By green moms, I mean like hippie moms, you know, like when hippie moms get really mad and they're like, that kid's too violent, you know, and they want to like legislate all the violence out of the world kind of thing. Well, this group of hippie moms was coming in, and they were like this squad, and they were like, Earth has crossed the threshold. This is a failed experiment, and we want to build a galactic bypass, just sort of like in Douglas Adams. We've got to get rid of Earth. This was stupid. This was a bad idea. It's never going to work. We should get rid of it. We're just going to annihilate it. There's nothing of worth going on there anyway. So I heard this, and even though I knew I was only 11, and who am I, and I'm just a pipsqueak, I kind of piped up, sort of like in Horton Hears the Who, you know, where there's this one tiny little voice, and only one being with really big ears hears that voice. Well, I was like piping up. I was like, excuse me, no, you can't do that. And they're like, why not? And I said, well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm here. There's good people here, and I'm here. Number two, if you wipe out Earth, you're going to destabilize your entire little interdimensional game. Like, where did I come up with this? But I could see it. It was like, you know, I was just describing a graphic to them. I'm like, I was seeing something like a 3-dimensional chess set, you know, and they're playing their little stratagems. Meanwhile, the living Earth, the heart of the galaxy, which is the heart of this particular universe, which is the heart of the multiverse, if you fucking wipe that out, you're going to destabilize your entire interdimensional game. So I strongly suggest that you back off. And that's what I did. I stood up for the planet at age 11 and said, don't touch my friend. Basically, I felt like I was advocating for Gaia, like a little sister or like a friend, or like a mom on life support or a friend on life support. I was like, don't you dare. And they said, okay, we'll give you 20 more years to work this out and show us evidence of actual evolvable intelligent life on this planet. And so that was about 1978. And so that would have made me more like 13 years old. I feel pretty strongly it was 1978. That kind of sticks in my mind. And I don't know why, because really, logically, it should have been more like 76. Maybe you guys can help me understand why I get these times mixed up. And I wish I was clearer on it. You know, was I 11? Was I 13? I don't know. I was definitely gangly and nerdy and all the things that I was my whole childhood. I know that. And dutiful and A students and all that other nerdy stuff. Okay. So they backed off, and I bought us another 20 years. And then I thought to myself, okay, so I wonder how we're going to do this. And then I saw the whole schematic, like right then and there. I understood that the fascist beings, the ones without heart, were coming from a place of control. And that the heart, I could feel my whole body, and I could feel that the very center, I'm all going to show you, the very center of my being was like a little hole, like a wormhole, you know, like the center of a magnetic field. And then there's this 0 point place right in the middle of that field where it's like a singularity, like there's nothing. It's not part of this and it's not part of that. It's its own thing. And I understood very clearly that Earth was here for us to learn about the heart, that all of the interdimensional and intergalactic races were here to learn how to love and listen and love themselves at the same time. To love yourself and realize that you're full of shit at the same time. To realize you're full of shit and love yourself at the same time. That's a huge lesson. And to understand that you're not better than anyone else, and that they're not going to endanger you, that all things have to exist in balance, and that the heart is the part of ourselves that is infinitely capable of holding that balance. And that if you go to the core of the heart, there's something very, very special there. Something that you can't buy for love or money. Basically the hidden key to the cosmos, the wormhole portal between dimensions, the ability to do all things, the ability to bridge space and time, all of that, it all exists right in the core of the heart. And that is good, because the heart is our ability to relate to each other. So I don't know if you're familiar with that Native American tale that said, the elders gathered together and they were trying to figure out where they would put the key to all of creation. You know, if they hid it at the North Pole, somebody would eventually find it and abuse it. If they hid it deep under the earth, someone would eventually find it and abuse it. If they hid it out in space, somebody would eventually find it and abuse it. If they hid it on the moon, you know, there was no place they could hide it. And then one wise old man said, I know what, or maybe it was like a little porcupine critter, said, I know what, let's hide it inside of them. They'll never think to look there. So I found in that moment that that was the truth, that the truth of the matter was that our interdimensional portal, our ability to travel into space and, you know, out of the 3D and into all that is, and to become part of that galactic collective and the universal Congress, lay within our hearts. And that the heart was the common ground, that the core of the heart was the singularity wormhole, and that that was a good thing because it's the heart that makes us not insufferable. You know, it's the heart that allows us to see someone else's point of view, to experience true affection, to create trust and vulnerability. The heart's just where it's at. What's really wonderful about the heart is, okay, the brain is pretty amazing. It's pretty cool, but it's kind of puny. That's why it's on the end of this little stem here. I mean, like, come on. You know, it's great. And we've got a higher self, and they talk about these upward chakras. But what I know for the truth is that if you think about all the different variables that go into creating a world, and you tried to hold everyone's interests at once in some kind of balance, you can only do that with the heart, the super math of the heart. The brain can't fathom it. The brain draws distinctions. It chooses pathways. And, you know, it's catching up with the heart, but the brain is educated by the heart. So as the heart becomes more empowered in us, our brains become smarter too, because we start to be holistic thinkers, not just left brain or right brain thinkers. We become whole brain, whole heart, whole being, super beings. And that's what we're here for. Yay. I think that might be everything, except for the Berlin Wall. Okay. So here was the thing. When I bought Us More Time in 1978, it's because we were on a timeline that was heading towards Armageddon. I think all of you guys are part of understanding this, that we understand that the moment that the bomb dropped, we knew we were on borrowed time. We knew it was just a matter of time between when all the countries had the bomb and any madman anywhere could just press a button and little children on the other side of the world could be vaporized. And I have to tell you, America is the one who created that original sin too. So, I mean, the fact of vaporizing little children on the other side of the world, we're the ones who did that. We're the ones who broke the treaties with the Native Americans. So, I mean, America thinking it's the greatest country, it's like, it's great, all right, but it's also great at messing up. It's more like the wunderkind, the wunderkind of the planet. You know, it's the youngest country, it's super smart, it's super gifted, and it's kind of bratty, way too powerful. So I feel like America is more like the wunderkind of the planet. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the greatest country, but if you're going to define greatest as in like most powerful and most like where it's all happening, like where shit's really going on, yeah, in a way we are the greatest, but not because we did anything right particularly. Okay. Let's see if I can remember where I was going with this. Okay, so we had this timeline that basically the stupid people running the earth who had access to the most lethal weapons ever known to humanity and no heart balance for using them wisely, they were in charge of everything. And it was pretty scary growing up in the shadow of the bomb, because basically you could get vaporized at any moment. And Generation X, I think, was acutely aware of this. And we made a decision as a group to live in the now, because we did not know when we would be vaporized. And ironically, we knew that if we were all vaporized at the same time, would we even notice? Like, if you and the person you're having a conversation with both stop existing at the same time, your conversation might not end. In fact, we don't even know. Maybe we already were vaporized back in the movie theater in 1975. You know, maybe that fucking happened. But as far as I can tell, we're still here. As Einstein says, reality is an illusion, albeit an extremely persistent one. So here we are. I'm here, you're here. We're in this persistent illusion. We might as well assume that it's as real as anything we've ever been involved with. And so we still work with what we've got. And fortunately, what we've got is us. We've got our ability to be ourselves. And that's like so exciting, because that's something that you know you can do. I love it. Okay, so we were on this timeline. We knew, I could tell, I was informed that by about 1999, we were probably going to all be toast. We probably weren't going to pass the 2000 threshold. And I knew I was going to be like 37 at that time, 35, probably 35. At that time, I couldn't even imagine being that old. But that was the deal, is that we had this nuclear timeline without heart balance, without higher wisdom balance, and we had to bring that stuff in. And that's why the Hinduism and the yoga and the drug culture and I was going to say the gay culture, but there's probably a better word to put it in, and multiculturalism, all that stuff had to come in so that we could have the heart presence and the full spectrum presence to choose a different timeline. Because the Cold War timeline was absolutely going to end with a cascaded set of nuclear accidents or actual full-out nuclear war. And everybody knew that that was going to all happen before the year 2000 if we didn't fix something soon. So here's the part that I find really fascinating. And that is that we think, as three-dimensional Earth geopolitical beings who pay taxes and earn money and pay landlords, that there's something that we've got to do, that we've got to pass better legislation, or we've got to put the bankers in jail, or we've got to create a law of some sort. And all those things are true. But what people don't really know is that where it begins is in your higher mind, accepting a different timeline, accepting its possibility. In other words, the biggest jail that we have is here. The jail that says that we're sheeple is what makes us sheeple. The moment that you can start to really, really believe in an alternate outcome is when, almost like magic, the external rearranges itself. I mean, okay, for people who had to work in Washington, D.C., which I rejected, people who had to work in companies, people who have had to be bureaucrats, maybe they knew that legislation was a whole long time coming, but it was not until the critical mass of the consciousness accepted a different outcome, then all of a sudden that 3D world stuff fell into place. On one hand, you could think this is very unremarkable, because let's say that we're just all in a dream, and suddenly you decide to dream something different, and lo and behold, in your dream something different happens. It's like not that miraculous. But since this 3D life is the only world that us 3D people know, the idea that you can think a new thought and something new will actually occur because of it, I think is pretty remarkable. And I think it's special. And I've had to fight tooth and nail with my own sense of fear to be able to bring you this perspective, because we have this 3D thing that says that none of this is real. I'm so happy that I get to share this with you. And I hope that your experiences have been very similar. I know that drugs have been really helpful for people to understand that there could be bigger worlds than the one that we've been engaging with our conscious mind. That's great. I want to let you know none of the paranormal experiences that I experienced had anything ever to do with drugs, which I think is pretty cool. Like, I mean, yeah, I saw some stuff on drugs, but that's not where any of this comes from. This came from, I was just moseying along my little kid life when all of a sudden a super being came and stopped time, you know, and gave me some information and then put me back in. Which brings up another idea that another set of doubts that come up, which is, well, what if we've been misinformed? What if there's evil ETs that are giving us bad information, and your sense of angels and higher beings and all this is not true at all? So there's this one school of thought that says that, and I really don't know until they tell me what they think life really is. Like, if life is just that there's this woman and she's like on an operating table and she's under anesthetic and she dreamed this entire dream and it's our world, until they like give me the outer story of what the fuck that is, I have to assume that you're here and I'm here and we're in a linear time in which we're creating a world together. And we have the option to liberate ourselves through being ourselves fully and completely. You know, the guides would say, just free yourself, or you're the only reason you're oppressed, or, you know, shit like that. And I felt like that was total victim blaming. Like they were not accounting for or taking responsibility for the fact that most of us have been traumatized as fuck by one thing and another, you know, being told no for this and this can't happen, and here's the world you live in, and by the way, you can't fly, and by the way, you're going to have to work and you're going to have to earn money, you know, all this stuff. Like, as far as I know, we're actually here. And that's all I've got to work with. You know, if people want to say that these were bad extraterrestrials or whatever, I do know, like I said, I felt that they were limited. I felt that they were like overly officious and organized and kind of military. And so I brought them down into the heart understanding. And they knew about higher understandings, but they didn't understand that it came from the heart. So that's very exciting. And one of my favorite ancient philosophies has to do with Sufism. And Sufism is a mystic strain off of Islam, actually. And it has always maintained that we are more than we know, but less than we think. And I love that. And they have like an entire mythology of like wandering dervish minstrels, you know, just a wandering student doing the best they can, passing on the wisdom as they see it, and participating in mysteries and, you know, miracles. And I think mysteries and miracles is what we're here about. So I can't wait to get a hangout together with you while we're all talking to each other and telling our stories. Because I feel that a story that's locked inside becomes, it can fester and work against you. And the moment that you're able to speak the story and not get stoned as a witch or, you know, branded as a warlock or evil or egotistical or whatever, or crazy, that you can actually utilize that energy and realize, oh, I'm not crazy. The world is weird and we're on a mission. And, you know, let's say that everything I said wasn't true, and you take a look at the world that has no higher dimensions and has no higher being and has no galactic guidance. If the world as is portrayed on ABC News is actually the only world that is, I mean, yuck, right? Like it's going nowhere. Okay, so let's break this down for a moment. Let's see, it's 11:29, so we've been here for an hour and a half. Let's break down the normie version of the world, shall we? Okay, all the power is held by people who aren't you. And you are supposed to go to work so that you can give all your money to people who aren't you because of taxes and rent and fees and stuff like that. Oh yeah, meanwhile, you're driving cars because there's no Tesla energy. We're digging up oil, 100 years after the car's been invented, we're still running on oil and like pretty much the dirtiest technology known to man besides nukes. And then you're going to have a little bit left over to try and have fun with. But if you do drugs or alcohol or overeat or any of the other sedating things, then it's because you're miserable. But how are you supposed to not be miserable in a world that's given all of its power away? So you've got, oh, and then if you do all those things, you're going to fuck up your liver, screw up your digestion, screw up your pancreas. You're going to have diabetes. You're going to have a heart attack because of all the cholesterol. Like, that's fucking miserable, people. I have to believe that we have a higher dimensional self and that it informs what we're here for. I have to believe that we're in an extremely rough rugby game where some of the very brainiest people happen to also be some of the most evil, and they're like putting up the opposition as much as they can. But at the end of the day, we are all on the same team, and I truly believe that. Because I feel that the only evil that we're facing is that which lacks heart. And since the heart is kind of the only being, that which lacks heart is really just God or love turned against itself. So basically like the crying baby who isn't getting what it needs. And so whatever the galactic beings are who are oppressing, if there is a cabal, it's because they're not in touch with their hearts. And the reason they're so bitter and so antagonistic is because they know there's a heart for them somewhere. And they just don't have it, and they don't know how to find it. And they want so badly to find it that they will put everyone else through hell until they find it. And you know what that means? It means they're going to find it. So that's what I'm really rooting for. Now, I got to backtrack. When I got the download in the movie theater, where I was told that there was like this horrible fascist overtaking of all of the universe if we didn't push back, and then we did. But sometimes it feels like we're still on the ropes. They told me, whatever me is, to just throw them out, to like take the cabal, this nematode like parasitic evil, and just throw it out. And at the time I thought, but there is no away, there is no out. If you simply exclude something, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back bigger and badder and madder. And it's also not going to be fixed. Like things have to get healed from the inside out. Now I'm feeling a little more like, oh yeah, okay, so like when your body needs to fight a cold or a virus or a germ, it fights it. It doesn't go, oh, let's see if we can hang out together. Maybe we can reach a stasis. Maybe they'll understand. No, sometimes within the bioorganism, you really do have to take the offending thing and just throw it out. Why it was created, why it exists, maybe to make us stronger, or maybe they're lost parts of the self, like the part of us that doesn't think it got enough love. Can it really get loved enough? And the part that can receive it, and what about the part that can't receive it? What are you going to do with that little tiny bit that can't receive the love that you're sending, doesn't want to receive the love, is completely addicted to control, and doesn't want the game to end. It could just be the tiniest part of ourselves that absolutely just doesn't want to evolve and is holding the rest of creation hostage. So according to my guides, I was supposed to just pluck that up and throw it out. And I feel like that's probably pretty true. I think that we've probably been patient with the cabal long enough. That's all I can really say about that, because in the end, I'm still an extremely nice person, you know. Like, I want everything, because I know that there is no peace without balance. So unless we have a true balance based on everyone understanding themselves and understanding each other, you're just going to always be patching things up. You're going to be fixing things and compensating for things, and nothing's ever going to feel like home. And I'm really trying to get us all home. That's what I'm here for. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I think, so I wanted to tell you, then the Berlin Wall fell, which was the whole point of the sci-fi novel. I was pregnant, I was on the road, I was having a man's child who I felt was a super being, even though he was not capable of being with us, because like he couldn't do money and he didn't like children, and he just didn't want to be a family guy, but he wanted me to be the mother of this child. So I was. I spent the whole year homeless and pregnant and working Renaissance fairs until I ended up at a birthing commune in Texas. This was 1989. I was 24 years old, and I was staying in like a converted bus, and I was watching my tummy getting bigger. I had just outrun some psycho killers from when I was homeless and on the road. I almost got like waylaid by some like Satanists who were going to kill me, but I had had a dream and got away from them. I was like, oh, that's what that dream was for, and I just buggered out. So I ended up at Greenbrier outside of Austin, ready to have my baby, but I had about a month to go. So my midwives were so helpful. There were lots of older women there to help me, and they gave me the book Spiritual Midwifery and also the Findhorn book. So I was reading a lot about the interrelated life of Gaia and all the different kinds of beings on all different levels, and how we all work together to create a healthy planet. And I was just thinking those kind of thoughts while I was growing my baby and wondering what birthing was going to be like, and reading in the Spiritual Midwifery book that instead of thinking about it like contractions, you should breathe your way through it and think of them as like surges. And so I was just getting prepared for having this baby, and wondering when she was going to come. It seemed like she was a couple of weeks late, and I was like, when is this going to happen? Thank you so much for listening through this. Like I said, I wish I was delineating the stories better. I hope this has been somewhat entertaining, triggering, and helpful for you. So one night, I was sleeping in my bus, wondering when the baby was going to be born, and I woke up at about 3 a.m. to something that I would call the presence of the Holy Spirit. It was this incredible awakeness and clarity. And I started speaking to the awakeness, speaking to the higher being, who was like God / father of my child, / ultimate one, at least within this dimension. And he was asking, as the father of my child, what's keeping this being from being able to incarnate? You know, is there a block? And I thought, well, let me look. So I stretched my mentality over the surface of the planet and wondered, what is it? Where's the energy blocked? Why can't this higher being, this new child, come in? And like a push pin, I felt like a dimple in the area of the Berlin Wall. And I said, oh, it's the Berlin Wall. It's the Cold War. It's that, you know, that Cold War timeline isn't allowing for the birth of this baby. And so I thought, you know what, let's just remove it. And that's what I did. And the father being said, "Are you sure about this? You know, it's going to make things worse before they're better." And boy, has it. And I said, "Yeah, but that's where the works are stuck." And so basically, okay, if you would imagine like a styrofoam ball, like a crafts ball you could buy from Michael's, and stretch some lycra fabric over it, that was sort of how you would visualize like the energy around the earth. And then basically it was all just stuck at that one point. And if you think about the geopolitical reality and that timeline I was telling you about, 1999, and the catastrophe, you can see how that particular place where the energy was stuck was what was creating and anchoring that timeline. So when I chose to pull it and toss it, it was going to create new energy circulation, that a lot of things were going to be up for grabs, and things could get worse before they got better. I don't even know if we finished playing that out yet. So that's what we did. I went back to sleep. I was like, I sent this prayer to the people who lived in the Eastern Bloc. And I said, don't be afraid of your governments. Governments are the creation of us. Just do what you need to do, be who you need to be, and just create this change. And about 48 hours later, the way I understand it, November 9th, apparently, some dude got up one morning with a sledgehammer, went over to the Berlin Wall, and just started knocking it down. Somehow he heard that voice, that prayer, that sense that it was time. And he just, and nobody stopped him. And by the end of the day, they were camping on it. People were driving through it, you know, like everyone was like just playing. And that was the biggest pattern interrupt and the biggest for massive shift that I can really point to. And at that point, what my guides told me was, see, shift can happen in a moment and history can turn on a dime. And that's what I learned. And that's why I'm so big about the shift. And everyone's been picking up on this shift idea, you know, for quite a while now, because we knew that we could never get from the world that we had to the world that we wanted step by step necessarily. Like there had to be, you had to anchor the knowing of where you were going before you couldn't just make little changes in the 1976 geopolitics to make things the way we needed them. We needed big sea changes. And so that's what we call, for shorthand, the shift. So the fact that the Berlin Wall could fall 48 hours after I had that dream let me know that we really are co-creating this world. The advent of the microprocessor, the advent of the internet, those were all things that kind of originated in the other dimensions. The internet, the soul group behind the internet was really interesting. I remember one night drifting off to sleep, and there was this group of like young people at the gate kind of thing, and they were like, say yes to the internet, say yes to the internet. I'm like, okay, yes to the internet, what is it? And they explained that the level of communication that we needed to have with each other, the amount of information we needed to share, and how quickly it needed to go, we needed computers and we needed the internet. And I was like, okay, I don't know what you guys are doing. I don't know what you guys are doing, but I'm going to take your word for it, because I know that you're coming from a good place. And sure enough, look what the hell they brought in. It's pretty freaking awesome that it allows me to talk to you on a computer, on a camera, uploaded for all time, where my story will be. All these stories that I finally was able to tell you are all here now for posterity. All this shit that actually happens. And you get to see me and feel me even when I'm not in this body anymore, and who knows when that'll be. You will still have this. And what I'm really blessed about is even though the being that I am, the spirit that I bring with me, is the most to the, somehow they have allowed me to continue to live. I am still here and I'm still saying my truth. And even though I post all the 9/11 truther stuff, which I do have a 9/11 story, next time, keep you in suspense. You know, it's pretty cool, this co-creation thing. Dudes, I can say I did this and I did this, and it means that I, plus probably several hundred other people in their dream time, we all did this. I did not do the internet. I mean, that was awesome. You guys are amazing. And so I can't wait to hear what your puzzle pieces are. Like, which pieces of the shift did you put in? Did you put in like the advent of widespread yoga and veganism? Did you put in the raw food meme? You know, basically memes are infectious ideas, like new thought forms. I want to know what memes you worked on. I'm so excited. When I told you guys I was coming online, people chimed in so supportively because I know you've got your own stories. And I can't wait to figure out how to hear them. If we should like do a radio show or just like get on a hangout and everyone take turns, that could totally work. And not record it, or get on a hangout and record it. You guys got to tell me what you want, because I really think that when you share your stories out loud, you're going to feel so much better, and your secret life won't have to be so much of a secret anymore, and you don't have to feel like you're the only one. I just think there's a lot of energy stored up and people thinking that they're the only one who sees what they see. And then they see other people expressing cosmic truths, but they don't quite jibe. And then they think, well, my truth must not really be true then. And I just think that that's not where reality is. It's not from authority. You don't need somebody else's authority, but you might need some companions, which is why I created Team Gaia. So we could have a team that we knew was a team. Okay. Yeah, it's tough. Whenever I get to talk about Team Gaia, stupid stuff like this happens. You heard my story. I love you. Can't wait to hear. Tell me how you want to share. Tell me how I can serve. Tell me what I can do to make this better for you. You know how to find me. It's not that hard. team-gaia.com, or just find me on Facebook. Find me on, message me on YouTube. I love you. And I know we're going to have so much fun. We are so fucking going to rock this. Namaste.